So we're missing validation here. Our form can be submitted with any kind of data, no matter whether it's valid, it fulfills our expectations or not. And that is something we, of course, can change. Back in our widgets, on every text form field, you can add a validator argument. Now, validator takes a function which takes a value and then returns something. To be precise, it returns a string. Now, the value you get is the value that was currently entered into the text form field. And the validator is executed when you call a specific validate method, or when you set on the form here auto validate to true, it will execute on every keystroke. So that's up to you how you configure that. By default, it's not executed on every keystroke, but when you call the validate method on your form state, which I will show you in a second. So you then get what the user entered, and now the idea here is that if you return null, this is treated as there is no error, the input is correct. So returning null means input is correct. If you return a text like this is wrong, the text is always treated as your error text, so as the message you want to show to the user. So therefore here you want to show, or you want to return a text if you have an invalidation error, and you want to return null if you don't have one. Now it's up to you when you have an error and when not. And when not, you write your own validation logic, and you can get as complex there as you want. In the end, of course, it's all about comparing that value or checking that value to certain conditions you have. For example, here, I simply want to ensure that the value is not empty. So here I can add a if check and check if value is empty. And if that's the case, then we have an error. So then I will return a text here, a string, where I say, please provide a value. And you can, of course, return any text you want. Else, or simply after this if statement, so if we don't make it into the if statement, execution will continue, execution will stop if we return here though. So after this if statement here, if we reach this return statement, I will return null, because then we have no error. Now the good thing is, such an error message will then be shown automatically. You can still configure it here in decoration. There, you can configure how long the error message may be that is displayed. You can set its general style by applying a text style here. So you can set the font weight, the font size, the font family, everything you can configure on the label and on normal text as well. And you can also use a default error text, which would be shown instead of the message you're returning. Here, however, I'm fine with that message. And therefore the question is, how can we now trigger validation if we don't use auto-validate on the form? We can trigger it through the form key. When we save the form, then we can also call form current state validate, and this will trigger all the validators. And this will return true if they all return, well, that there is no error, so if they all return null, and it will return false if at least one validator returns a string and hence has an error. So here I'll store the result in a isValid constant, and only if isValid is true, I want to save that, or put in other words, if it's not true, hence the exclamation mark, if it's false, then I will return, and since this cancels the function execution, or stops the function execution at this point, this code will then not run. So now I'll only save the form and output my results if the form is valid. So hence now if I save this, and I have an empty title, and I hit save here, you see we get the error message, we get this nice error style. And as soon as I enter this and it's valid, we get rid of that. So now this is how you add validation. And obviously feel free to now add this on the other inputs on your own as well, with any rules you want. In the next video, we'll add validation together for the remaining inputs.